With respect to lifelong learning, I guess this is what you'll hear a little bit more about. But I came to this organization 7 years ago initially to help work on a new medical school project where I work as the Dean of Education in addition to my current role. And it really was the leadership of the organization and its commitment to learning and lifelong learning that allowed that to happen with respect to what we were able to put together and the innovation necessary. So for those of you who know anything about medical schools, this is a very different medical school than previously. This is one, and I think Kathy will talk a little bit more about how important it is for it to be more about learning than teaching, and we really focused everything on the students and really threw out a lot of the legacy. And give you a couple of examples. We don't have any lectures. It's all small group learning. We have no multiple choice question tests. All our students, physicians to be, are in practice from the earliest days of their medical school experience. And we were criticized heavily because people wouldn't do well on USMLE exams, and et cetera, et cetera. But it really had more to do with the way people should be learning. And I think maybe our most important metric is that even though we were a startup medical school, students recognized, young people recognized what the proper way to learn was, and it wasn't the old way. So we were able to recruit, again, as a brand new medical school, students with metrics who were just behind only 3 other medical schools in the entire New York State. So Cornell, Columbia, Mount Sinai, slightly higher metrics in terms of GPAs and MCATs, but right from the very day that this school opened, students were right up there ahead of 14 or 15 other medical schools. Now, that's not to say, wow, you guys are doing something better than everybody else, et cetera, but it's what you set up is the proper way for people to learn. Kathy will talk a little bit about, we'll talk a lot about the Center for Learning and Innovation, but there's a key metric in the bottom right-hand corner, if you can see that, and that is at the Center for Learning and Innovation. Last year, we logged over 245,000 learning hours. So this is used by the entire organization. So at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Kathy, and she's going to begin to tell you a little bit about the various programs that we built with respect to leadership.
Thanks, Dave. So I think the one thing you'll see that's consistent by the end of the story is our learning strategy and the pedagogy that we use, whether it's the medical school, whether it's developing future leaders, et cetera. You'll see that's a common theme. Also, I would add, we are in the middle of developing a graduate school of nursing to align with the medical school. So we will have a graduate school of nursing for advanced practice nurses to graduate, as well as the medical school and as well as a PA program. So we will have another real innovative opportunity to do interprofessional education in academia, and really responding to the call from the Carnegie Foundation, from the Institute of Medicine, et cetera, that, you know, at the beginning of the supply chain of employees, which is at the universities, traditionally we learn in silos, but to do interprofessional education, and of course in the long run it makes it much safer for not only the patient but the staff. And so that's how we educate and train, and that's how folks learn in our organization. So we have, and this evolved over the last decade, 5 programs that develop leaders. And the reason I had the arrows going up, because I did not want anything to look hierarchical. They're all important. So, and then there are touch points where we bring all these groups together, and then they go through case studies together. And so we have some, in our audience, we actually have Patty Edelman, who oversees the program. David and I are up here talking. She does all the work. Raise your hand, Patty, and her team. And then we have some of our physician high potentials and our administrative high potentials here, so they'll keep us honest as we're speaking. So let me start with our A-LEAD program. And so the A-LEAD program was one of the first programs that we put together when we developed this corporate university. And we developed the corporate university in partnership with GE. And this is back in, you know, probably about 12 years ago, since they have always been known to develop great leaders. And so they had this model of Crotonville. And so they partnered with us. And it was not called A-LEAD at the time, it was called Core Management. So this was just, for frontline supervisors and managers, core competencies that we thought that they believed. And so this program has been revised as we have changed as an organization 3 or 4 times. So this is where we are today. And today it is competency-based. HR did a great job a couple of years ago developing competencies for the organization. So we took these competencies and we did a competency map to make sure what we think everybody is learning actually is aligned with competency development. So for those that are in this part of the business in your organization, we would recommend that you do competency mapping with respect to, if these are the competencies you want your leaders to have, make sure that your curriculum aligns up with that. Again, David spoke about the flipped classroom model and the core principles. So essentially learning is an active pedagogy. We have the same pedagogy no matter where you come, whether you're a medical student sitting there, or whether you're going to be a graduate nursing student sitting there, or whether you're a high potential sitting there, or a lead. There are no lectures, there are no multiple choice exams. We use cases, many times from the Harvard Business School. You can always pull good cases, generally cases that have nothing to do with healthcare, which is really good because problems are really common along all industries. And then, of course, there's plenty of pre-work. So when folks come into the class, everybody just needs to be ready, right, guys? Because otherwise you get stuck with a cold call or something like that. So there's plenty of pre-work. The only time we bring people together is for application purposes only. So A-leaders targeted, supervisors, frontline managers, et cetera. The real challenge for us is, first of all, with 50,000 employees, and we have a ridiculous number of managers, and they might be called managers, but really not have people report to them. So by the time we go through all of that, how do you get all of these people through a program? So right from the get-go, our philosophy is no car wash. We're just not running people through to say we did it. That people to develop competencies or skills, and we work off the philosophy of deliberate practice, is they have to be practiced. It takes time, because this is all about changing how you behave. So that's a big challenge for us. And we focus on adaptive leadership rather than technical leadership. So part of the program is that the managers will bring a leadership challenge with them, and they work on it through the whole 6 months that they're in A-Lead. So you'll see the application centers, it's case-based. Afterwards, there's always a debriefing, so people can sit and talk about what they've learned. We do simulation, team-based learning, et cetera. So this is a 4 blocks. Runs over 6 months or so, maybe 7 months, depending on if Ebola interrupts and interferes with what we're trying to do. I won't go through everything, but essentially, when you can take a deeper dive into these slides. So the next program that I want to talk about is the Administrative High Potential Program. And that we've been running probably for about, this is Administrative High Potential Program. Probably, this has evolved as well. It's probably over, 2002, 2003. Again, we've had a lot of lessons learned with this. The HR does a great job in terms of the nomination process, and I think just like going through the application process for selecting good candidates to be in your medical school because the learning is so different, this is the same thing. So who comes into the high potential program is key. Sponsorship is key. So if Kathy Gallo puts somebody in the high potential program and they're just not ready and they fail, et cetera, it's really about Kathy Gallo nominating that person and not about that person. So again, with high potential programs, we strongly recommend that there's sponsorship, and whoever nominates the person also has some accountability for their success or failure, and also to help them navigate. One of the big important skills in our organization is how do you navigate the organization? Because it is big. And has a lot of politics, as all big companies do. So this is a very important ingredient. So every October, from HR, we will all get an email saying, would you like to nominate somebody? And these are the categories: emerging team leader, operational leader, or strategic leader. And then you fill out an application and all your reasons, et cetera, and then it goes to HR, and they compile everything and look at more data, and then sit with the senior leadership, and then decisions get made. So deeper dive into learning. Again, I won't go into everything. This is the curriculum. Everybody, no matter what program they come through, goes through emotional intelligence assessment and MBTI. Everybody. And emotional intelligence assessment, we know, is key. MBTI is great because then you come to the whole point of that course is to appreciate others that are different than you, that think differently, and how they add value to the team. Right? If you have a team of everybody like yourself, you duplicate your strengths, but you also duplicate your weaknesses. So it's important to appreciate others. So this is important. The other development avenues is, well, first of all, the faculty for these programs are content experts and our senior executives. So our CEO, Dr. Battinelli, our chief financial officer, many of the senior leaders are actually faculty. And the key to the faculty is they need development. So we don't want them going in there with slides. So it takes a little bit of prodding and poking, and Patty handles that with making sure executives don't come, and except for the CEO, he can say whatever he wants. He usually talks about what's on top of mind. He can do that. But everybody else, we want them to stick to a framework where when the case is done afterwards, it all connects. So faculty development is key, and having a one-to-one with the senior executives, because everybody in the organization, particularly leadership, is responsible for creating other leaders. Not just the chief learning officer or the chief medical officer, but all the senior leaders. And then we also, for example, our CFO and his team, they teach the healthcare finance, and then we bring in somebody from Citibank as well to also be part of that class. So this is a portal for the high potentials to go on that was developed by HR, and there's a lot of conversations and dialogue on that, and things get posted, et cetera, so that's very valuable. So the next is our physician high potential. You want to come up there, talk about this? So this was we formalized the Physician Leadership Institute probably about 2 years ago, but we were always working on stuff. So we have a tendency to be under the radar screen, working on different programs, and then once we have it tweaked and we think we're ready for prime time, then we'll formalize it. So this is probably about 2 years old in terms of formality.
So the Physician Leadership Institute, really have to congratulate Kathy for helping get this off the ground, and Patty Edelman, who's really the boots on the ground and the director of this program. And I think she needed a doctor to help her, so they allowed me to pretend to be the co-director. But she does, as Kathy says, she does the work. So this is these are two really important programs. So I want to, if I can go back, just show that there's a little difference here. I'm going to talk about the Physician High Potential Program, and this is really taking a cohort of physicians from anywhere in the organization and really developing them. And then the second piece we're going to talk about is a Physician Administrative Fellowship, which is a little bit more specific to more junior people, and talking a little bit how more they will get into sort of administrative components rather than just leadership. So one of the problems we had with the Physician High Potential is physicians don't like to be called high potential. Here they are. You want to stand up, you guys? It's like, competing their whole lives, trying to get good grades, et cetera, and then somebody starts calling me high potential. But it's really, we took that terminology from other places, and most of the time, at least right now, we tell them they got to suck it up, and that's what we're going to call you for a little while. But it really is, But it really is a little bit more about leadership and development, because there is a key component of this particular program, and that is that we feel that we can take people and move them from where they are in their sort of clinical and academic lives into more other types of leadership, no matter where they are. And I think what's been borne out by the program is that you don't have to look just at the 30 and 35-year-olds. You can look at the 50 and 55-year-olds as well. And it really has much more to do about what the nomination process is and what you really believe their ability and their potential is. So when we get into that nomination piece, I'm going to make a few more comments about that. That said, the Physician Leadership Institute has grown rapidly, really rapidly. And that's because I'm sure, as you know, physicians are quite competitive by nature, and once somebody finds out that they're in the high potential program, even though they don't want to be called high potentials, then all of a sudden everybody wants to be in the high potential program in various programs. So we actually, on this slide, show you that we have programs for chairs of medicine, and it is more than fun, I would say, Patty, to watch the chairs of medicine go through the MBTI and the emotional intelligence quotients and those sorts of things. They really don't like to show the underbelly. The high potential program we talked about, we have this for medical directors, so because we have so many institutions, while I work as a CMO, I obviously have local CMOs at every place, and they have a particular curriculum. We do some team building throughout the rest of the organization, and we teach chief residents, et cetera. We're a big educational organization. We have 1,500 residents and fellows, so we literally have hundreds of chief residents at any point in time. So the physician leadership piece has been key. This is a terrific slide. I think it's obviously a nice depiction of somebody moving between the clinical role in the white coat and the suit. I usually have to walk around and remind people I'm not a lawyer. I actually still am a doctor, even though I don't get to wear the white coat all the time. But at this piece here, I want to talk a little bit about the nomination process, because I think that there are key features that we look for. So in general, when we tell people that we're looking to build physician leaders, there's sort of three characteristics that we're looking for. One is there has to be a certain amount of clinical credibility. Doctors are an arrogant group, as you all know, and sometimes listen to other people, but usually if they're a doctor, and only if they think that person's a good doctor. That's what we're sort of, it's not gender specific, believe me, it's across the entire piece. It's a problem, but we got to live with it. But you do need that. You need the clinical credibility. So we make sure that that person has clinical credibility. The second is that they're selfless, and by that I mean that it's not all about them, that they're willing to invest in other people, and that they're willing to build teams and build and recruit people who are stronger than them. And again, that may be an important feature in all leadership institutes, as well as making sure that somebody will actually follow them, not just declare themselves the leader. And then the last is another important piece, and that is the ability in some way to govern. And by that, everyone has said, what do you mean govern? And I mean, I'm not saying rule, that's the other piece doctors think about. I think, is this about ruling? No, it's about leading. This isn't about authority. This is about influence. And you've got to have some previous track record somewhere of running something. It can be a Boy Scout camp, Girl Scout camp, whatever. You're going to have to run something. So it's this clinical credibility, the selflessness, and ability to govern. The physicians have been very happy going through the program. You can see from some of the data. They've actually moved in a positive direction on their EQ scales, et cetera. What's the curriculum? Again, congruent with what Kathy's talking about, it is an experience. Okay, this is not just a set of lectures or seminars, but it's an experience, and the experience, and this is a key point, takes time. Because physicians are slower than everybody else, we actually have a 2-year program for physicians, and everybody else does it in a year. But I actually think that the 2-year program may even be better. And the reason is that it doesn't matter what you look at when you look at education. You can't cram things into a shorter period of time any more than, no matter what you do, it takes, I talk about this, it takes 6 years to learn how to ride a bicycle. And it starts at year 1. And you don't ride a bicycle until you're 6 years old. And somebody said, well, I taught my son to ride a bicycle in 2 weeks. And I said, no. It took 6 years. When he was ready, he was able to ride the bicycle. But you cannot force it. There aren't any 2-year-olds running around riding bicycles. It's just a developmental activity. And all of these things take a time to have the experience, sit in the experience, digest the experience. move back, figure out how you're going to change. And I think that moving this along the 2-year was, I assume it was Patty and Kathy decided it was brilliant. It wasn't the doctors. But anyway, we have, here's the things. It's thinking about leading and influencing, organizational behavior, economics. I think that what the experiences are intuitive. When you do a needs assessment, everybody sort of comes up with the same thing, but it really has to be experiential. And it's complemented by a number of electives, and that's simply just whatever they'd like to do. Cases, the opportunities to meet with senior leadership. But the key part about the experience is that you are immersed. So you will move from one place in the organization to another. My favorite sort of story about the doctors is you may go to a finance meeting or a capital meeting or someplace else, and there'll be a lot of people. You present all the data, and then they come back and they sit with me and it says, it looks like we just made a decision based on $30 million in 20 minutes. And in the academic world, I can assure you that doctors are used to, well, let's sit around and talk about it, and then we'll have a discussion, we'll make a decision, we'll come back 2 weeks later, we'll see if we thought we made the right decision, So the pace of the corporate world is light years faster. But on the flip side, I tell the doctors, look, it looks like you just made a diagnosis of life and death in about 20 minutes. And they're like, yeah, well, that's different. I know that stuff. And I'm like, I understand that. That's the difference. You need to get immersed in the culture. You have to figure out what's going on, and that part's been the success. This is a look at our cohort, and I'm going to make a couple of other key points about this cohort. So this is a cohort from a couple of years ago. One is that when we look at physician high potentials and we look at the nomination process, there are 2 important features to that. The first is that we tell people this is about leadership development, not rehab. So don't take somebody who's not functioning well someplace else and give them to us, because we'll catch on fast about that. Because we, just like with anything else, we're looking for that sort of right-hand side of the bell-shaped curve. Give us your talented people, and we will bring them to the highest level as they will motivate themselves, they're ambitious, et cetera. So we're not into rehab. The second is just make sure that you really have a plan for that person, somehow within a time frame of a couple of years. Because the last thing you want is to build a program and then have no place for people to land. We had 40 people in our first, and many of them successfully moved in or already were moved into junior positions or senior positions. In the second year, we actually moved this down to 20 physicians in that program, primarily because when we vetted the program and said, listen, do you really have a spot for this person? There was a little hesitancy. So we really went very carefully and then made sure that people recognized that if they were nominated and they didn't get in this year, that meant that they should just reapply, and that this is basically just a timing issue. It wasn't like now you're excluded from the physician high potential or whatever you want, a leadership development program. So that was a key point. We do mix the groups. We have the administrators, administrative people, and the clinical people get together. There's a lot of interdisciplinary learning. When people talk about team learning, interprofessional, interdisciplinary learning, it doesn't mean you sit in the classroom and you learn together. It means that you sit in the environment and the experience and you learn to work together, not learn to learn together. That's how you develop a team. I'm going to finish up with this next group that I talked about, which is the Physician Administrative Fellowship, and it's our newest program. So what this program does is that we recognize in this rapidly changing field, especially with the move to value-based care, which is a big place that we're focusing, we're bringing on relatively junior physicians, usually just finished their training, and then immersing them in a year-long program that is about a 50-50 program, 50% clinical time and 50% administrative time, similar to some of the others, but they're junior people, and we're focusing this a little bit more on the changing culture of medicine and where one needs to be able to understand what skill set one needs to be able to go from a fee-for-service into a value-based care model. So we just started it. We had process that we got going late last year. We're funding this through the various departments who are doing some of the nominations. And this year, we actually wound up with more candidates and are currently in the process of finalizing our decision. But we had 4 outstanding candidates, and we're going to have to select 1 or 2 depending on our funding. I think we'll probably wind up with 2, but these were really outstanding people. We used a committee, et cetera. It was a strong process. And this is the sorts of things that they'll do. So Care Connect is our insurance company, so that's a major place for people to go. Care Solutions is the sister organization to our insurance company, which is our care management organization. And this is where people are learning about all the various other things that will go into a more premium-based market, and then all the usual places that people need to be to understand the difference between what they're used to in terms of the academic and clinical world and the business world. We have a lot of other opportunities that you can see on this slide. I won't go through all of them, but I think a key piece is just the immersion opportunities as well as bringing people to the various leadership. And, you know, it's one of those sort of things that, you know, if you believe in people and if you get them to believe in themselves, they can do unbelievable work. So I'll turn this back over to you, Kath.
So another point about the Physician Administrative Fellowship Program is we also went through the process last year, and we went through the interviews, and we didn't select anybody. And that's an important point. So it's as important as you can't rush development. And so when you get the pressure, and you will, whoever does this stuff, and everybody wants everybody developed, you know, in 6 months, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not fair to the person. It's not fair to the process. It's just not, and it's not fair to the organization because you can't force development. So, but I thought, you know, I remember when we all sat around and we thought, we're not going to select anybody. We're going to wait. And that's what we did, and we have a nice group to select from now. So the final program that we'll discuss is our Administrative Fellowship Program, which has probably, you know, 10th anniversary last year or the year before, so we just selected our group for our 12th year. And I remember walking down the hallway 12, 13 years ago, and Mike Dowling said to me, you need to get some young people in here that have never worked here before. And I was home, my kids were home from college with their friends, and they were talking about how in the summer they were going to do an internship, one down at Goldman Sachs, the other at Bank of America, and I thought, gee, that sounds a good idea. Maybe we can do something like that. And that's how the Administrative Fellowship Program began. And, you know, again, we had to tweak it over time. So it's a postgraduate program. This is our process. You can go through it when you receive the slides. But, you know, as you can see, we're pretty process-oriented. Of course, you know, in our Center for Learning and Innovation, we're surrounded by industrial engineers and Six Sigma black belts, so you have no other choice of being process-oriented. So this is 2014. We just went through this. So we receive well over 100 completed applications a year. And essentially, I take them all home, and I make the first cut. Then I bring them back, and usually about 30 of them come out. I bring them back, and then we have 3 days with different teams of former fellows going through the applications to select who's going to get a telephone interview. So then the group gets cut down to 52. We do the telephone interviews. Again, it's done in teams. It's done over 3 days. And then that group gets cut down. We selected 14 to come on site. And they go through 2 panel interviews, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. We use behavioral interview questions. The teams are a senior executive, a former fellow, and a current fellow. Those are the interview teams. There's tools we use. Following week, we bring everybody together, and the 14 are rated and ranked. And that's where the debate starts. So this year we selected 3. And always, every year, whoever interviewed the applicants that are just outside the area that we're going to accept, the big debate starts. And that's when we see people will change. More discussion occurs around folks. So the formal interview is one thing, but then we have other fellows and other executives have lunch with them. It's a whole other interview. Or when they're waiting to go in for an interview, we always have folks with them, and that's the conversations that come up. when we're making the final selection. And you would be surprised how people get knocked out because of those informal interviews. So then we call them that afternoon. They have 24 hours to get back to us. And this year, we had such a stellar group that we put aside about 20 resumes that we have sent out to executives to take a pick from. We also sent over to Joe Muscola, our chief HR officer. We gave him resumes to look at. So we really did have quite a hard time, but there is so much talent out there. If you're not doing an administrative fellowship program, I would say consider it. And you don't need to take, like 1 year we took 15, which was my boss's idea. It was not a good idea. But, you know, anywhere between 3 and 5, I think you can really build capacity in the organization. So they get 4 rotations, and these rotations change as the organization changes. So we have a lot of the fellows out in ambulatory now, or in the insurance company, et cetera. But we always put them in the tertiaries because they're big, they're complex, tons of moving parts, and it's good experience. They have a preceptor on site, so there's 4 rotations. The last is an elective. The other 3, they last about 3 months, and then they're all mentored at the C-suite. So each fellow has a senior executive as a mentor. And there's other opportunities. The CEO will have breakfast or lunch with them 3 times during the year. Each senior executive will either take them out to lunch. The CFO always takes everybody to the steakhouse up on Northern Boulevard at night for dinner. And the whole dialogue and conversation usually evolves around, how did you get where you are today? What is your job like, et cetera. You know, what are some, what things would you have done differently? What advice do you have? So it's a very nice casual conversation, and actually they learn a lot from that. So we get great graduate schools. These are some schools that we actually took fellows from over the years. Rotations. So since 2003, we've had 77 fellows come through. Today, we have 43 with us. Others have gone off to bigger and better jobs that we didn't have. We have one that's actually a CEO of a health system up in New York State. We have others that, you know, have some pretty high-level positions, and we tell them go when they get these opportunities, particularly if we don't have an opportunity for them. We're always here. Go have another learning experience, and then come back. A couple of years ago, asked them to put together learning portfolios. So it not only helps them when they go for interviews, because these fellows get several job offers just in our health system. I mean, I have phone calls today that it never fails. They want to hire them. And that's the other thing. The answer is no. They have to finish their fellowship. And then if there's really an opportunity that I know is going to pan out, I advise the fellow, you may want to do it as an elective. Do it as your last rotation, and then you're with, you know, the department that you're going to work with. But again, it can't be rushed. Or they want them to stay an extra 2 weeks. No, because the other preceptor is waiting. So it's to be, to sustain the process you put in place, and you tweak it when you get feedback and you have to improve it, but not just to have it willy-nilly. So these are their learning portfolios. They are very, on very visible initiatives, purposely. It's a lot of hard work, and there is no meeting they can't go to. In fact, we make sure they're at the board meetings. We make sure that they're at, you know, very confidential meetings, so they understand exactly what's going on in the organization. And these are just a handful of the current positions that they're in. And they're fairly well high level. Something else that we do, their first job, they all have the same title. And we don't budge on that either. They're all project managers. Because we don't want one fellow coming out and getting a director job and another fellow coming out and getting a project manager job, because it just starts a whole host of issues. And the salaries are the same. There's no bidding, et cetera. So that's always with the first job out of the gate. After that, when they move on to other roles in the organization, then, it's entirely up to them and, whatever the compensation strategy is. But coming out of the gate, we keep it nice and equitable for everybody. So that's it for the overall programs. Again, there's no hierarchy. One program is not more important than the next. We're a big organization. Over time, we just strategically target certain populations for programs around, and several times a year, they all come together and work together on cases. This is a book I advise for everybody to read, Talent is Overrated, and it all talks about what really separates the high performer, whether it's the elite athlete, the pianist, the executive, what separates them and how they got there. And it's all based on practice, right? So the principles of great performance, deliberate practice. Leadership development embedded in the DNA of the organization. Stretch and grow on the job. Give the high potentials, the administrative fellows, et cetera, the toughest jobs, right? Because when you're uncomfortable about things, you learn how to do it better. Knowledge application, of course, feedback, and just don't bring people together to lecture to them like I'm doing to you. So this is a great slide, and I think before NCHL, and NCHL was a great catalyst. When we got involved in NCHL, how long ago was that, 12 years ago? Yeah, 12 years ago. Believe it or not, healthcare, never even heard of leadership development. Right? Never even, and the mission, right? Be a catalyst for change. So I have to say, mission accomplished. Everybody's trying to figure it out now. But 12 years ago, this is how we pick leaders. So here the artist says, I'm sure he will make a great leader. Look how his consciousness has evolved. I mean, essentially, leaders were selected. We used to say, it's like a beauty contest. And then you put them in roles and don't give them opportunities to learn, and then all of a sudden the career gets derailed. So lessons learned, keep it simple, keep it small. Our administrative high potential program we've learned, so since 2003 there's over 500. Many of them have moved, a good percentage have moved and advanced, et cetera, but it's too big. So we're going to also cut that down because then the folks don't get visibility. So keep it simple, keep it small, and constantly improve it based on the environment. The single biggest way to impact an organization is to focus on leadership development. There's no limit to the potential of an organization that recruits good people, raises them up as leaders, and continuously develops them.